clapperboard, he rewinds a clip of his wife smiling, zooming in frame by frame, until the flicker in her eyes feels like a dagger. At a dinner party, everyone silently scrolls through highlights and awkward pauses from earlier that day, an air thick with the scent of data. And finally, he stands alone in front of the mirror. One press of the remote, and his eye, the grain implant, is gone. The screen goes black. In this world, memory isn't remembrance, it's footage. Emotion isn't feeling, it's evidence. Black Mirror Season 1, Episode 3, The Entire History of You, is arguably the most intimate and philosophically lethal installment of the series. No dystopian megacities, no AI overlords, no reputation systems. Just a man, a marriage, and a memory chip. And yet, it's this very simplicity that stirs our most primal anxieties. The premise seems innocuous. In the near future, everyone has a small device implanted behind their ear, the grain, which records everything they see and hear. Every moment of your life can be replayed on a screen, reviewed, zoomed, dissected. You can relive a job interview, audit a conversation, even verify a lover's alibi. It sounds convenient, maybe even revolutionary. But what this episode makes painfully clear is that the real horror isn't in the tech, it's in us. Director Brian Welsh and writer Jesse Armstrong take what appears to be a domestic drama and crack it open to reveal something far more disturbing. A world not where governments surveil us, but where we surveil ourselves, our partners, our past. If you could remember everything, would you still have the right to forget? If every emotion could be cross-examined by footage, could trust survive at all? That's the core dilemma we're about to unravel. What begins as a quiet marital crisis evolves into a brutal parable about technology, privacy, jealousy, and emotional control. Magnifying glass tilted left, buckle in. We're about to decode one of the most piercing and prophetic stories ever told on television. Clapperboard behind the scenes of The Entire History of You. This episode is unique in the Black Mirror canon. It's the only one from Season 1 not written by series creator Charlie Brooker, but instead by Jesse Armstrong, best known today as the creator of HBO's Succession. In fact, this episode was Armstrong's writing sample when Channel 4 invited outside voices into the Black Mirror universe. What captivated the producers? Armstrong's razor-sharp take on the core Black Mirror question. What happens when technological progress outpaces emotional maturity? The inspiration came from something deeply human, a couple's argument. Armstrong once caught himself in a fight, obsessively referencing past phrases word for word. Then came the thought, what if we could just roll the tape? Would it solve anything, or destroy everything? That's the magic of Black Mirror, taking ordinary frustrations and extending them until they become existential. Brian Welsh, who has a background in documentaries, directed the episode with a raw, grounded realism. He rejected the usual sci-fi aesthetics, no flying cars, no glowing gadgets. The palette is cold, sterile, minimal. The world feels too real. There's no heavy CGI, just a small ear implant and a remote. That restraint is what makes it so chilling. This isn't the future. It's 5 years from now. There were originally more ambitious features in the script, like shared memories and hacking, but the creative team stripped them away, keeping the focus tight. A private archive turned against oneself. Executives initially worried that this slow-burn marital drama wouldn't captivate audiences like the spectacle of episodes 1 or 2. No national hostage crisis, no dystopian talent show. But instead, it became an academic darling, frequently cited in psychology, media ethics, and relationship studies. What makes it powerful is precisely this. It doesn't ask big questions with big special effects. It poses the biggest questions in the smallest spaces. Memory, trust, control, intimacy, all colliding in a home that once held love. If you could rewind your life, would you actually be happier? In The Entire History of You, director Brian Welsh crafts a quiet, yet suffocating narrative that gradually builds the weight of memory until it collapses onto the viewer like a slow-moving avalanche. Through restrained visuals and stripped-down production design, this episode builds a prison of emotion, a future that feels too close and too inevitable to escape. The entire visual language of the episode leans into a minimalist coldness, silvers, steel blues, sterile whites. It's an aesthetic of digital detachment, one that echoes the very premise of a world where every single moment can be replayed. No warm nostalgia, just cold clinical playback. Welsh is a master at psychological framing. For instance, over-the-shoulder shots are used repeatedly, putting the audience in the unsettling position of a voyeur watching a couple review memories with forensic scrutiny. In key rewind sequences, Welsh leans into rapid cuts, looping images, and intentional blurs, simulating the invasive pain of extracting memory like pulling nerves raw. As Liam's suspicions grow, the cinematography becomes increasingly claustrophobic. Framing elements, doorways, curtains, furniture, always divide the couple on screen, symbolizing the emotional rupture and erosion of trust between them. The final shot is devastating. Liam stands alone in front of the mirror, shaving the implant off the back of his head. The camera creeps in slowly behind him until we're face to face with his hollow gaze. He's not a man moving on. He's a man cutting ties with everything, including who he thought he was. Liam is perhaps the most ordinary protagonist in all of Black Mirror. He's not ambitious, not violent, not dystopian. He's a well-educated, mildly insecure, emotionally anxious guy, like someone you know. Like you. His emotional arc is a downward spiral. Suspicion, a vague unease about his wife's past connection to someone else. Paranoia, using memory playback to scour for clues, becoming a self-styled detective of his own life. Control, forcing Fian to replay private moments, demanding the truth on his terms. Collapse, learning everything, and yet gaining nothing. The truth doesn't save him, it breaks him. It's not a redemption arc. It's not even a revenge story. It's a man lost in a feedback loop of his own making. Fian, meanwhile, isn't villainized nor sainted. She's just someone who made a mistake, a person trying to move on. When Liam forces her to expose those memories, we see a portrait of intimacy violated by data, privacy shredded by digital recall. Her silence, her fear, it's not guilt alone. It's the horror of being dissected by someone you once loved. What makes this story so uncomfortable is that it doesn't ask us to take sides. It just lays bare a devastating truth. If you demand full transparency and love, you'll shatter the very trust that makes it possible. Memory doesn't equal truth. Transparency doesn't equal intimacy. The genius of the entire history of you lies in how it deconstructs two myths of the digital age. That data can reveal truth. That openness equals trust. The grain lets you recall, replay, zoom in, like we always wished we could. But the episode's brutal message is clear. Memory isn't salvation. Truth isn't always healing. Liam becomes less a partner and more a human database. He stops believing in his wife's feelings, trusting only in pixels. He forgets that memory is not about accuracy, it's about the choice to trust. There's also a chilling metaphor here about how technology commodifies relationships. The grain isn't just a sci-fi device. It's a reflection of our real-world habits. Checking texts, screenshots, likes, DMs. We're not just feeling emotions anymore, we're auditing them. Just like in social media, we don't live in moments, we analyze them. We don't trust, we verify. Love becomes a spreadsheet. Pain becomes a playlist. This episode might not be as flashy as others in Black Mirror, but it's arguably the most intimate horror story of them all. It speaks to a world we already live in, where our need to remember everything could be the very thing that destroys us. At the end of technological progress, are we headed for emotional collapse or social evolution? In the entire history of you, what we're witnessing isn't just one man's emotional breakdown. It's a slow, systemic erosion of intimacy itself. And the impact of this story doesn't just come from its concept. It's the meticulous collaboration between director Brian Welsh and creator Charlie Brooker, their shared vision for structure and style, that makes this episode so haunting. Unlike other Black Mirror episodes that lean into nonlinear storytelling or multiple timelines, this one plays out in strict linear form. There are no flashbacks, no time jumps. Every memory replay we see isn't a cinematic flashback, it's a live in-world playback initiated by the characters themselves. That structural choice is the cruelest trick in the episode. Time moves forward, but people get stuck in the past. The plot doesn't move through action, it spirals through memory. Every beat, every escalation, comes not from something new happening, but from Liam rewinding the past. What's normally a background function, remembering, is weaponized as the engine of the story itself. That structure creates enormous psychological tension. You can't change the past, but you can obsess over it until it destroys the present. As the final episode of Black Mirror's first season, the entire history of you is Charlie Brooker's first deep dive into how technology rewires our most intimate relationships. Compared to the first two episodes, this one both extends the show's core themes and breaks new ground. White heavy checkmark what it continues. The cold, systemic pressure that crushes personal feeling, just like the national anthem's public shame or 15 million merits commodified dreams. The satirical, fatalistic structure that offers no real escape, only transformation into another layer of the system. Prohibited what it breaks open. It's the first Black Mirror episode to target the household, not the state or the platform. It abandons grand sci-fi aesthetics for a stripped-down, domestic drama. It replaces spectacle with emotional claustrophobia and intimate terror. Welsh, with his documentary sensibility, turns a basic marital dispute into a slow-burning psychological thriller. For example, he keeps the home lighting soft but dim, evoking a kind of emotional prison. Liam replays memories on the stairs, on the couch, in the hallway, each space becoming a station in his descent. In the final confrontation, the camera barely moves. We don't watch a conversation, we watch a trial. The bedroom becomes a courtroom. The screen becomes evidence. This isn't marriage. This is litigation. And that, perhaps, is Welsh's most cutting accusation about modern intimacy. So, who do we trust, technology or the right to forget? Since its release, the entire history of You has sparked intense, interdisciplinary debate across media critics, academics, psychologists, and philosophers alike. Magnifying Glass Tilted Left supporters say, this episode is the X-ray of modern relationships. Many praise the show for revealing how data has invaded intimacy, how transparency can actually destroy trust. The New York Times wrote, "This isn't sci-fi, it's marital realism." Psychologists have referenced the episode when studying the negative effects of hypertransparency in couples, with some studies suggesting that repeatedly reviewing old texts or photos can amplify anxiety, distrust, and emotional distress. Cross-smart critics argue, this is another example of tech pessimism taken too far. They accuse Brooker of ignoring the potential upsides of a system like the grain: better safety, courtroom clarity, trauma recovery. Some say the show assumes all humans are incapable of using tech rationally, which they see as condescending. Others point to a more subtle issue. Isn't Liam's use of the grain just a digital version of male control over female memory? In this reading, Liam isn't just obsessive, he's digitally abusive, turning technology into a tool of patriarchal surveillance. Puzzle piece neutral voices suggest, as philosopher T.M. Scanlon puts it, the tech isn't the villain. Human insecurity is. He argues the grain isn't inherently toxic. What's toxic is our inability to trust what we cannot verify. This very tension is what makes the entire history of You one of the most widely analyzed Black Mirror episodes to date. Not because it answers big questions, but because it confronts us with a paradox we still can't resolve. When memory becomes evidence, when every moment is accessible forever, can love survive at all? Not every memory is worth reliving. Not every truth is worth uncovering. What makes the entire history of You so bone-chilling isn't just the technology, it's the realization that technological cruelty rarely breaks into our lives violently. More often, we're the ones who open the door. In this quiet yet gut-wrenching cautionary tale about memory, control, betrayal, and emotional collapse, director Brian Welsh and creator Charlie Brooker reveal not a dystopian future, but a slow-moving breakdown that's already embedded in the systems we live with. Brick foundations and structure, the illusion of choice in self-imposed surveillance. One of the most disturbing things about the grain system is that no one is forced to use it. There's no megacorporation demanding access, no authoritarian regime mandating installation. And yet, everyone has one. Everyone replays memories, job interviews, hookups, casual hangouts. It's not a violation. It's convenience. And that's exactly what makes it dangerous. This is Brooker's most Foucault-inspired critique of power to date. No one tells you to rewind, you do it anyway. No one says you must save everything, but you can't delete a thing. No one demands you go digging, but you can't stop yourself from zooming in on every facial tick. It's not top-down control. It's internalized surveillance. Link love, control, and the weaponization of memory. Liam's tragedy isn't just that his wife cheated. It's that he tried to verify love with tech instead of talking to her. He plays back her expressions, analyzes her tone, fixates on timestamps, until he morphs from wounded husband to digital detective. The marriage doesn't die from betrayal. It dies from paranoia, enabled by power. The grain doesn't destroy trust. It just makes mistrust easier. Brooker uses their relationship to launch a larger critique of modern intimacy. Memory is capital. In this world, memory becomes a currency. It's traded, weaponized, turned into leverage. When Liam demands that Fian play her footage as proof, it's not just an emotional plea. It's a litigation strategy. This isn't just a relationship, it's a courtroom. And no one's calling the judge but each other. The myth of the necessary truth. Would the truth still matter if it destroys everything? Without the grain, maybe Liam and Fian would have argued, maybe broken up, but without evidence, it would have remained in the emotional realm. Instead, the truth obliterates everything. The ultimate irony? The tech doesn't cause the pain, it just removes our ability to escape it. The collapse of the self. The more you watch the past, the less you live in the present. Grain's true damage is to your sense of time, identity, and peace. Liam endlessly rewatches happy moments not to cherish them, but to disprove them. His spiral is one of emotional self-erosion. In trying to fix the past, he wrecks his future. The parable, is the grain a stand-in for social media? Or a precursor to digital identity itself? Zooming out, the entire history of you isn't really science fiction anymore. In many ways, its tech already exists. We scroll through WeChat, texts, DMs, email archives. Photos from years ago pop up in our feeds uninvited. Phones prompt us, on this day a year ago. We may not have grain implanted in our necks, but our devices replay our lives just the same. Brooker uses this subtle analogy to ask a devastating question. In a world where remembering becomes automatic, do we still have the right to forget? It's an early warning about data sovereignty, emotional privacy, and digital ethics. Can we control our past? Do we even get to choose what we remember? Or have we outsourced that right to platforms and systems we can't shut off? Brooker's ultimate point isn't about futuristic tech. It's about the present-day anxieties that make us crave control in relationships. The grain isn't the villain. It's the mirror, a sleek, high-resolution, high-def black mirror, magnifying everything we don't want to admit about trust, control, and our need to turn love into evidence. We don't revisit the past to remember, we do it to doubt. We don't replay memories to heal, we do it to destroy. Out of all the Black Mirror episodes, the entire history of you left an unexpectedly deep scar. It didn't shock viewers with grotesque humiliation like the national anthem, nor did it rail against platform capitalism like 15 Million Merits. Instead, it delivered its gut punch with quiet precision, like a scalpel, not a hammer. It touched something far more intimate. Do you really want to remember everything? Satellite antenna, the debate it sparked. Why did this episode make people so angry and so helpless? The audience response was sharply divided. Emotional, personal. Supporters said, "This is the most realistic Black Mirror episode. It's not about technology. It's about how relationships fall apart." We've already been using phones, texts, screenshots, and chat logs to quietly destroy love for years. This isn't science fiction. It's the present. Grain is just like social media memories. You can always look back, but you can never let go. They argued the episode wasn't warning us about future tech. It was exposing how humans are wired to cling to the past, to distrust the present, and to obsessively search for proof where love used to be enough. Critics, on the other hand, pushed back. Fian has no real agency. She's silenced, cornered, and stripped of dignity. This is male-gaze paranoia disguised as storytelling. The show blames the marriage failure on the grain, but never explores the deeper psychological trauma beneath the surface. These critiques hit at the core of the episode's controversy. Is the entire history of you about how tech hurts us, or is it using tech to mask deeper imbalances in gender, trust, and power? Compass power and responsibility, so who's to blame? One of the most unsettling things about this episode is that there's no clear villain. The grain is optional. No company hacks anyone. No government is forcing surveillance. This isn't Big Brother. It's little brother, watching from within the family, from the pillow next to you, from your own eyes. So, who's responsible for the collapse? Brooker gives us a brutal answer. Everyone. This is a tragedy of collective complicity. Every person in this world props up the system, just like we do, every day. We don't express emotions honestly, but we seek evidence to assert control. We can't tolerate ambiguity, so we dig up truth at the cost of peace. We know technology is reshaping intimacy, but we still feed the machine for convenience. Liam and Fian's marriage didn't just collapse because of a memory implant. It fell apart in a silent war of doubt, silence, power, and fear. Balance scale, what moral lines did this episode cross, and what does it say about us? Cross mark, the right to forget is gone. In a world where memories play back in 4K clarity, can anyone ever move on? If every mistake, every insult, every heartbreak can be replayed forever, Does healing even stand a chance? Cross-smart privacy in intimacy collapses. Fian did end her affair. But thanks to the grain, she's forced to relive it, pixel by pixel, word by word, under pressure, in interrogation. Is that love, or just surveillance in disguise? Cross-mark authentic feelings become suspect. If you say, "I love you," how do I know it wasn't performance? When memory becomes searchable data, feelings become footage to analyze, not emotions to experience. These three ruptures form the ethical heart of this episode. The more precise technology gets, the more fragile our human connections become. The entire history of you isn't just a story about a couple falling apart. It's a warning about what we lose when we demand that love prove itself with evidence. We're living in an age where memory is mined as data and emotion is compressed into metrics. The entire history of you may have been the closing chapter of Black Mirror Season 1, but the world it predicted has already arrived. The chilling part? It's not about futuristic grain chips, it's about the tools we use every single day. Smartphones, cloud backups, social media, voice assistants, facial recognition. Together, these technologies form the invisible infrastructure of our very own real-world grain system. iPhones now automatically compile memories of your photos from a year ago, set to music, polished with filters, curated nostalgia. Instagram and Facebook feed you flashbacks with prompts like, "Look back on this day." Voice assistants and search engines predict which past moment you might want to revisit. Smart homes and car cameras can record your entire day in high resolution, externalizing your memory like surveillance you subscribe to. Home security systems now include AI emotion tracking. That's not science fiction. That's your front door. These aren't futuristic concepts anymore. They're actively reshaping how we remember. We're no longer recalling the past. We're replaying it, just like in the show. And the consequences are piling up. Couples scroll through old texts during fights, pulling up screenshots as ammunition. You said this. On March 14th, at 3:42 p.m., group photos become social evidence. Who was late? Who didn't smile? Who didn't show up? In workplaces, archived emails and CCTV footage are now routinely used to settle disputes, track productivity, assign blame. We've shifted from trusting in the warmth of shared memory to obsessing over the cold precision of stored data. And when "I love you" becomes something you can rewind, pause, and dissect, have we already lost the ability to just feel it? Even in real life, we've started living in what you could call emotional surveillance mode. Location sharing. You said you were at the store. Why are you still at the gym? Read receipts. You saw my message. Why didn't you reply? Call logs and photo syncs. You told me you weren't in touch. Then what's this? All of it promises digital security in relationships, but at the cost of turning your partner into a suspect. The grain didn't invent mistrust. It just gave it 24/7 access and a highlight reel. As philosopher Paul Ricoeur once wrote, our future depends on our ability to forget. But today, forgetting is treated less like a human right and more like a tech flaw. Social apps archive everything: your texts, your calls, your face. Cloud storage makes every photo eternal unless you fight to delete it. Right to be forgotten laws in the EU and France reflect growing resistance to data colonialism, but your digital past is still more likely to be owned by tech corporations than by you. In the episode, Fian's deepest pain wasn't just the affair. It was that her husband refused to forget because the grain wouldn't let him. In real life, we're not so different. We're forgetting how to forget. And it's costing us something we can't store in any cloud. Peace of mind. We created the technology, but in the end, it's what defines us. The entire history of you didn't just predict where tech was headed. It helped shape the way we talk about it. Culturally, ethically, emotionally, it became one of the most eerily prescient and personally invasive stories Black Mirror ever told. When it aired, the response wasn't just strong, it was raw. Across Reddit, TikTok, and YouTube, viewers flooded comment sections with confessions that sounded almost too familiar. I've paused texts mid-fight, zooming in on their face, just like that. We're all terrified of the "what if I'm wrong" replay. It's like every moment in life needs video proof just to feel real. That shared anxiety sparked an explosion of memes, short skits, parody edits, and even mock trailers, targeting the growing cultural paranoia that, in relationships, evidence matters more than empathy. Puzzle piece spin-offs and cultural mimicry. The episode didn't stay confined to fandom. It bled into real-world creativity. YouTube podcasts debating, technological trust versus human trust, used it as a reference point. TikTok creators stitched the episode with videos about AI-powered relationship analysis and emotional surveillance. There were even viral tutorials for using ChatGPT to reconstruct deleted text conversations, eerily echoing the grain's replayability. These weren't just reactions. They were cultural reflections, proof that we now use art to interpret reality, not to escape it. Brain in Academia, a case study in tech plus ethics. This episode has become a foundational text in media, ethics, and post-human studies. It's currently used in courses across leading global universities. Cambridge University, Post-Human Media Culture. Columbia University, Digital Surveillance and Memory. Tsinghua University, Media Ethics and Social Control. It's not just media criticism anymore. It's a lens for understanding how memory, privacy, and control are being rewritten. Clapperboard further viewing. What happens to love when forgetting is no longer an option? To go deeper into the existential questions raised by the entire history of you, here are 4 films that explore similar themes. 1. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, 2004. Light bulb, what if you could erase the memory of someone you loved? Pushpin Why It Matters, the mirror opposite of Black Mirror's premise. This film asks what we lose when we try to forget too much. 2. Her, 2013. Light bulb, when AI remembers everything. Do humans grow closer or lonelier? Pushpin Why It Matters explores the emotional intimacy and emptiness that arise from hyperconnected digital relationships. 3. The Final Cut, 2004. Light bulb, should the dead have their memories edited? Pushpin Why It Matters. Like the grain, memory becomes commodified. Who owns the past when we can cut and splice it? 4. Don't Worry Darling, 2022. Light bulb, when a fantasy world is built from curated memories, what's real anymore? Pushpin Why It Matters, a gendered critique of control, surveillance, and illusion. Memory becomes both a prison and a mask. Books essential reading. Unforgetting, Surveillance, and the Right to Rewrite Reality. 1. Irresistible, Adam Alter. How tech hijacks your attention and rewires your memory. 2. Memory and Ethics, John Sutton. A deep dive into when memory should be preserved and when it must be let go. 3. The Recorded Brain, Matthew McGowan. Examines how neural interfaces may one day record perception and what that means for the soul. 4. The Surveillant Assemblage, Kevin Haggerty. Unpacks surveillance as a power structure, exactly what the entire history of you visualizes. Just like Liam said, you can't just edit me out. At the end of the entire history of you, Liam stands alone in front of the mirror, replaying fragments of what used to be happiness, frame by frame, before he takes a razor to the grain implant behind his ear. This line, originally shouted during his final argument with Fian, now becomes something else. A farewell. To her. To himself. To everything he once believed. On the surface, it sounds like a man refusing to be erased by the woman he loved. But beneath it, this is the core metaphor of the entire episode. In an age where memories can be trimmed and rewound, who still owns a complete version of themselves? In Liam's case, it marks the end of a marriage. But philosophically, it's a cry for the right to exist. Socially, it's a quiet rebellion against the commodification of memory. Question mark, what if the story had played out differently? Repeat button, what if the grain let you delete memories? We'd be looking at a gentler kind of tragedy, one where pain gets erased before it can shape us. Emotions become manageable, sterilized, reduced to color-coded files. The sadness disappears. But so does depth. Mobile phone off, what if Liam had never installed the grain? Maybe his marriage would have still fallen apart, but at least he would have had the mercy of fuzzy memory, that blurry human margin where forgiveness grows. Film projector, what if Fian had access to Liam's full playback too? Would she have broken sooner? Would she have edited her past just to keep their relationship alive? And if so, would anything left between them still be real? Every alternative timeline points to the same cold truth. Clarity doesn't guarantee peace. Precision doesn't equal happiness. Performing arts, so what is this episode really about? It's not just a story about dangerous tech or a cautionary tale about fragile love. It's asking us something deeper, something that feels more urgent every year. In a world where everything is recordable, rewindable, and shareable, do we still have the right to forget? This episode isn't warning us. It's interrogating us. It's trying to show us that replays don't prove love, and evidence doesn't equal truth. You can rewatch 1,000 kisses, but you'll never feel the warmth of that moment again. You can hold every receipt, but still miss what was really being said. Brain, let's turn the lens on ourselves. Thought balloon, if you had the grain, what's one memory you'd want to relive? And what's the one memory you'd delete forever? Speech balloon, have you ever wanted to replay a conversation to prove you were right? Chart decreasing, have you ever gotten so lost in old photos or messages that you missed what was happening right in front of you? Film projector, if there were a device that could record your life 24/7, would you install it? Why or why not? If you and your partner had to share all your memories with each other, no filters, no edits, would you do it? Drop your answers in the comments. And if you'd rather not say a word, just drop one emoji that captures how this episode hit you. Broken heart, brain, magnifying glass, tilted left, light bulb, film projector, hole. The final shard of the Black Mirror. This wasn't just the story of one man's emotional breakdown. It's a story about civilization losing its ability to forget. There's no blooper reel, no comedic relief, no after credits wink. Because Charlie Brooker doesn't want us to feel okay. He wants us to walk away unsettled, to go back into the real world and ask ourselves, would you trade the blur of memory for the pain of perfect clarity? If this kind of relentless, deep dive storytelling speaks to you. If you want more episodes that break down culture, crack open tech myths, and examine the raw truths of human nature, then don't forget to thumbs up, like, outbox stray, share, bell, subscribe. We're just getting started. Next episode, we enter Black Mirror Season 2, Episode 1. A devastating techno ballad about grief, love, and digital resurrection. Be right back. Are you ready to confront the ethics of bringing back the dead with AI?